Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Wednesday show where I basically answer your questions. Every week, I put out a video where I basically will answer any questions that people put in the comments below. So if you want a question or have a question that you want answered, just put it in the comments below, and next week I will do my best to answer it. This week we got some pretty cool questions. Actually, I'm pretty excited about some of these questions. The first one is from K Munin. Um, do you think modern comics will ever have the chance of holding the value of Golden Age comics? Okay, so that's the first, and he actually has a second question, which is, what is your number one comic on your want list? The number one comic on my personal want list right now is Chamber of Chills 19, which is the famous cup glass where she's holding it against her face, and it's like a skeletal hand that's holding this cup near her face, and you can see her face is like kind of like a skeleton. That's right now, that's the number one on my want list. I've tried several times to get that book, and I've always failed. I keep on getting outbid. So that's the number one on my want list right now. Once I get it, then I'll move on to the next book. But to answer the question about modern comics, will they ever hold the value, or will they ever reach the values of the Golden Age? I can sort of give you a few examples and really kind of address this in a very different way. There are certain Golden Age books that have historically not performed that well. You can pick up some Golden Age books for like $20, and they will be $20 probably 20 years from now. They won't go up in value that much. And there's some Golden Age books that will spike in value, and there's others that will probably go down in value. They're just like modern age books. They go up and down. And we've actually seen this with one of the most famous Golden Age books, Superman #1. It lost $1 million value in its value recently. I mean, that's a recent thing where it sold for $1 million less than it had previously. And so when we say, will modern books have as much stability as Golden Age books? Well, Golden Age books don't necessarily have that much stability either. That's one of the misconceptions. Modern Age books do fluctuate more, but Golden Age books have just as much likelihood to go up or down. And what we see though is Golden Age books will generally be more like kind of like a blue chip status, where they kind of slowly go up in value, whereas modern books are really just trying to establish their value. So what are modern books now will be old books 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And what you'll see is the modern books will have that sort of same established stability. And really what it is the market, especially for certain key books, will kind of get more and more refined over time. And that's generally what we see. As more books get graded, the market is more aware of what actually is out there. So you know that the supply part of the market is sorted out over time. That's what happens. Like, as more books get, graded and sort of put on that census, then we kind of know how much of a supply there is. And once time kind of settles in terms of those characters being more and more established, like a Miles Morales is a good example of this, where over time, like 20 years from now, the kids that grew up with Miles now are going to be like, well, that's a Grail book. that's a book that's a blue chip key, and they will look on it that way. And so what you'll see is that book will have a very established value and go up very slowly over time. It won't see the big spikes that it does now, or big drops that it sees now, but it will kind of go up more steadily like a Golden Age book would. In terms of values, there are many modern modern books that have bigger values than the Golden Age books. I think of, again, Spider-Man, the Georgic variant, which sold like for 20 some thousand dollars. It's, there's certain books that are pretty expensive even in the modern age. And those books will probably, as I said, once the census is kind of more sorted out, once the demand is kind of sorted out over time, they will either hold their value or at least consistently hold value. So yeah, it's a time thing. I remember back in the '90s, it was the same thing. So this going back 30 years, those books were all over the place. A book would come out and it would be $20 the first day, and then a few months later it would be like nothing. There was that kind of thing, or sometimes it would just keep on going up. So really, it's just a matter of the market kind of getting stabilized, and it just takes time for that to happen. So I hope that answers the question. Next question comes from Fan for Collecting. What are your favorite Supervillain teams? Do you have their first appearances as a team? Yes, I do. So I'm going to show you 4 of my favorite Supervillain teams, starting with probably my favorite, and it comes in this one. This is Captain Marvel number 22, and this is the first appearance of the Monster Society of Evil. And actually, does it even say that on the book? No, it doesn't. Okay. Really what it is Mr. Mind, who's this kind of like caterpillar-like creature. He basically gathers all of the super villains to go up against Captain Marvel, because individually they just have no chance against Captain Marvel, but as a team they might have a chance. And Mr. Mind is really, really smart, and he basically puts out a call to all the villains, and he establishes the team to go up against Captain Marvel. And it's actually a serial where they have like multiple, I think it ran like 10, 15 issues, where it was just like a continuous story where they were building this team and kind of setting up Captain Marvel. Okay. And in 26 is where you get the reveal of Mr. Mind. So this is, Mr. Mind doesn't make an appearance in this book, but he's just a voice on the radio kind of thing. But the team makes an appearance in this book. So this is considered to be the first appearance of the team, the evil monsters of the Monster Society of Evil. So that's that one. Another one that I like, and I feel weird for saying that I like this one because I only like it because of one character. I know it sounds bad, and it is the Frightful Four. I like it because of Medusa. I really like Medusa. I think she's so cool with her hair. I just think her hair is just so awesome. I just see it as like a really cool superpower. And usually she's kind of a sexy character, and I kind of gravitate towards the more sexy characters. So this is where the Frightful Four make their first appearance, and this is Fantastic Four number 36. Yeah, 36. And another character group that I really, really do like, and actually I gathered all of their first appearances because I do like them, is the Sinister Six. And I was really hoping that the new Spider-Man movie was going to be about the Sinister Six. So you just get all the greatest villains going up against Spider-Man. I thought it was cool that they were just, within the Spider-Man books, if you look at the first maybe 10 to 15 books of Spider-Man, they really set up all of his rogue gallery. It's like one book after another, just releasing all these amazing characters. And then this is sort of the combination of all that, where it's just like, wow, we put them all together and we're going to have them all against Spider-Man. So just a really cool set of villains all put together into a team. So the Sinister Six. I believe also, I should mention this, I believe that the Monster Society of Evil is the first time you get villains all teaming up against the superhero. Okay, another really great one is I like Golden Age characters. I like Golden Age DC, and I like the JSA, which is the Justice Society of America. Well, I like the fact that they have the Injustice Society of America, which is all the bad guys teaming up. So you got like, I guess it's a Gambler, Brainwave, the Magician, what's his name? I'm trying to remember, I'm blanking on his name. So you get all the villains up against, actually, does it say? It might even say the Wizard, the Thinker, and Degaton, and Vandal Savage. Okay, so you get, they actually, I like the way that this is a great cover too. You can actually see them kind of picking which part of the U.S. that they're going to carve up, and you get all the heroes in bondage. I really like these this team. I just like the idea of Injustice Society. I think that's really funny, I more or less like this team because of the Stargirl series. You know, they played a major role in the Stargirl series, and I think it's really cool to have their first appearance, which is All-Star Comics number 37. So those are my favorite evil teams. Yeah, I just thought that would be fun. Okay, next question comes from Mike Swintel. I saw that the new Barbarella had variants all the way to the letter G. What is the all-time record for incentive covers or variant covers? So this is actually a really interesting one. I actually had to look up to find which one had the most, and I got a list of the top 7 comics that had variant covers, and for the most variant covers. So the first one, number 7 on the list, is Detective Comics 1000, and there's just so many variants for that. It had 86 variants, and that's number 7 on the list. It just, how can you even come up with that many variant covers? I mean, who would even collect all those? Number 6 on the list is Vampirella number 1 from 2019. They had 87 variants. The next is number 5 is Godzilla, Kingdom of the Monsters from 2011, and that's number 1 as well, and it had 104 variants. The next one is Batman number 50 from 2016, and it had 106 variants. And then Batman again, Dark Knight number 3, The Master Race number 1 had 108 variants. And then number 2 on the list is Amazing Spider-Man 666, had 145 different variants. And the number 1 on the list, and this is a shocker, this one just blows away the rest, just kills the rest, is The Walking Dead number 1. It had 253 variants, just crazy number of variants. So if you are a variant collector, you have your work cut out with these books. These are just a crazy number of variants. I just thought they were very interesting. I actually do collect some variants, but not to that extreme. That's just too many of one book. You get like a long box and it's just one comic. So the next one is from Black Box Silver and Bronze. You often mention Charles Biro. Can you tell us about the 1949 Topps magazine by Biro? Okay, so if you're not familiar with Charles Biro, this is his art style. And I could show other examples, but I think this one kind of gives a bit of an example of Biro's art style. And it's important to understand his art style because if you look at it, unlike a lot of like modern books, for example, where it's just a simple figure on the cover and, maybe a pose. Well, Biro's stuff is complicated. It has a lot of stuff happening. You got, for example, this woman, she's like shooting back at the cops. This guy's been shot in the eye. You got some dead bodies here and here. There's a lot of story that's being told within one panel. Now, when he writes, and and this was an issue with Topps, he likes to have lots of text where people, it's not like it's not narration, but it's with dialogue. What he'll do is he'll have the stories being very, very verbose in terms of the dialogue. So there's a lot of word bubbles where people are talking, and that is what is laying out the scene. So it almost reads like a book in that respect. And what he wanted to do with Topps magazine was he wanted to create a book not just for kids. He wanted something a little bit more intellectual and appeal to a much, much more sophisticated audience. So I read one page of one of his books from the Topps magazine, I should say, and it was a coat check scene. And in the coat check scene, the woman's like explaining that, there's a man that comes and he's explaining which coat, and she's all shocked at first. And there's like the dialogue between them, and then there's dialogue that happens with other characters, and then they go back to them, and it's like more dialogue, where he's asking her on a date, giving her a little bit of a tip, bigger tip than what normally you would give back in the day. Like he gives her like a $5 tip, which would probably like be like a $50 or $100 tip now. And then he asks her out on a date, and it's like this big, long, complicated page, just one page. But you really get a sense of the characters. You get a sense, oh, this one guy that's asking the girl out, he is kind of a bit sleazy, maybe a little questionable, but rich. She's not really interested. She's kind of creeped out by the guy. You get that kind of sense from the story. So there's a lot of that character development that happens within that page, but it is, if you have page after page after page of that kind of level of dialogue and stuff, it really gets boring fast. Even though you get to real rich sense of the characters, it gets boring fast. And that was the problem with Topps. It only came out with 2 issues, and it did not sell. They were big, actually. The other thing that was weird about it was not comic format. It was the same as a life-size magazine. It's a Life magazine. It was, it's a fairly big size. And it it didn't appeal to comic goers because they're not going to buy those big format books, and it didn't really appeal to the more sophisticated people because they wanted more like a lifestyle magazine. So it just didn't find its market, and it just didn't sell, and they only produced 2 issues. And as a result, though, if you can find an issue of Topps, either number 1 or number 2, then they go for big money. They can go for about $6,000 plus for one of these magazines that feature the artwork and editorial work of Charles Biro. So very interesting book. I didn't really know much about it beforehand. I had to do a lot of research on it, but they did come up with a reprint recently for it, and you can actually pick that up really, really quickly and easily. Usually it goes for anywhere from $20 to $50, kind of that range, for the reprint. And you just search for 1949 Topps magazine, and you'll find like dozens of the reprints available for sale. So yeah, an interesting one. So Lyle Hobson wrote, "Can you trust sending your Golden Age comics to CGC?" Okay, so here's the way it works with CGC. When you send your comics to CGC, that is the biggest ordeal that you'll have to face, just getting them to CGC. Once they're at CGC, you're kind of okay in a way because they will insure the books based on the value tier that you put them in. So you will say when you create your form and you submit your books, you will kind of appraise them to a certain extent, and they will give you insurance based on that. So if they get after they receive them, as long as they don't get lost at that point, or if they get lost at that point, or get damaged at that point, or get lost on the way back to you, then you're fine. But getting them to CGC is the big fear. And there might be a little bit of a fear while they're at CGC because CGC is not necessarily the best at providing transparency about what's going on with the books. But for the most part, yes, you can trust sending your books to CGC. You just be really careful. Pay for tracking and insurance on the books when they go to CGC, just to protect yourself. Um, it's just one of those things you got to do. Make sure that you have the tracking and have insurance for the trip to CGC. As long as you do that, you're pretty much good. I've sent some pretty big books to PGX, and I didn't have any problems. I was always nervous about it, but they were pretty good about dealing with me. Another thing is, now there have been horror stories about CGC damaging books. Sometimes if you have like older books, like Golden Age books, and the staples are questionable, like where opening the book could pop the staple, then that can be an issue where you can get your book slightly reduced in grade by just them examining it. So that's one of the things you got to be a little bit careful about. Brittle pages is another thing that could have that same thing where it could like literally crumble in the person's hand and therefore cause damage. So those things are just things you should be aware of before sending those books. Maybe consider not sending them at that point, but something to consider. Just so for the most part, I would say yes, safe to send to CGC. Okay, next question comes from Matthew Miller. Do you have any signature comics, and how do you feel about the yellow labels in general? Okay, I actually like the yellow labels. And I'm going to show you an example of a non-yellow label. But originally, both CGC and CBCS did not use yellow labels. And I'll show you an example of that. Here's Stabbity Bunny, #1. And it's signed by Rivera, and who I think is the artist. I believe it's the artist. I might be wrong about that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the artist. But the old CBCS labels were in this kind of reddish color, and it really doesn't look that great. The red doesn't look that great. They later switched out to the yellow labels, and so for the most part, that part, the color, I guess, I like the yellow gold labels. They look good. Now, in terms of signed books, that's the other part of that question. How do I feel about signed books? I'm a little bit old school, and I've really changed over the years, but I used to like when the artist or writer or whatever it was would sign the interior page because it wouldn't interfere with that cover. But now, as long as the writer or artist signs in a way that doesn't interfere with the cover, I don't mind it too much. But there's one thing that I have to note about yellow labels in general, and CGC particularly. CBCS doesn't have this issue, but CGC does. And the issue is if they do not witness the signing, they will not verify it. So I'll give you an example of that. So this is a green label where it has actually a bunch of signatures from all the creators involved with Beavis and Butthead in this case. And because it's not witnessed, it gets a qualified grade. And it looks kind of crappy to have it in the green label, because usually when we associate green labels, it's like something's missing from the book. Well, with CGC, what they'll do is if it's not a verified signature, they will give it the green label. Now, you can actually, from what I've been told, you can actually pay, or when you get it graded, you can actually say that you don't want the green label. And what they'll do is they will look at the writing on it and grade it based on how much that lowers the grade. So obviously, writing on a comic does lower the grade. So they'll give this, for example, a 9.0 instead of a 9.8. So you got to really choose your battles on it. Which do you prefer, the green label or the signed 9.8? Also, another thing that you could do is just send it to CBCS and they'll verify the signatures. So you could get this where it doesn't have a green label and it has the gold label. Now I'm going to show some more just for fun. Some of my other yellow label books, and hope you enjoy. So we got Elf Quest. This is Fantasy Quarterly #1. It's actually the very first appearance of Elf Quest, and it's signed by the two creators, Wendy Pinney and Richard Pinney, husband and wife team that created Elf Quest. So kind of fun stuff. And another one that I was super excited to get, this one actually, is The Crow. This is another CBCS, and it's signed by James Obar, so the creator of The Crow. So yeah, just a really great one. This is issue #3. And then we got my Fantastic Four #2. This is signed by Stan Lee. Now, this is a good example of that old school way of signing things. So you'll notice on the cover, there is no signature. Well, this is actually signed on the interior page. So there is no Stan Lee signature. Now, this is where the old school doesn't necessarily work with the modern era, because if you're going to get your book slabbed with the signature, like getting this nice yellow label, well, you probably want the signature to be on the cover, because now you can't look at that signature because it's now encapsulated. So this is one of those times where it probably would make sense to not have it signed on that interior page. So that's Fantastic Four #2. I actually love when I can get Golden Age signed books. And one of my favorite Golden Age ones is Sun Girl #1. And this is signed by the creator and artist, Ken Bald. Just a really great one. And he signed it in a really good placement, I think. It doesn't interfere with his artwork. So just a really cool book. This is one of the prizes of my collection. And next is, I like getting also rare books that you don't usually see, and I like getting signed versions. So this is Captain Britain #1, and this is signed by Chris Claremont. So just a really rare book, hard to find. It's a complete copy. This one is hard to get complete because it's always missing this mask. So this is a complete copy with the mask. So just a really cool one. And yeah, that's some of my collection. Actually, I have a bunch more yellow label books, but I figured I'd give you just a little taste of my collection on that. So it's not something I go out for or where I look for yellow labels, and but if I can get them at a reasonable price, I will buy them. There was one yellow label that I picked up, for example, that was actually the same price as the cost of the slab. it was slabbed yellow label, and it was $20, and it was a cool cover. So yeah, I was like, oh, why not? So that's the kind of opportunities that I usually do like. I know that sometimes you'll see with the yellow labels that the price will dramatically increase based on the fact that it is a yellow label. I don't necessarily like paying up that much for a yellow label, but if I can get it for a reasonable price, I do not mind. So that's it for that. If you have a question and you want to ask it, just put it in the comments below and I will do my best to answer it. I hope you enjoyed these answers, and thanks again for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and bye for now.